My name is Lena Carter. I'm 28 years old, and tonight, I realized the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely weighs exactly 94 pounds, snores like a chainsaw, and is currently pinning me to my own living room. Floored it. If you're imagining a clingy boyfriend or some tragic late-night drama, let me stop you right there. My boyfriend left 3 months ago and took nothing but his guitar and my sense of direction. What he didn't take was Benson. Benson is my dog. My best friend. My lifeline on 4 giant, muddy paws. Some people have support groups, therapists, or a mother they can call at 2 in the morning when the walls start closing in. I have Benson, and tonight, he decided that if I wouldn't pull myself together willingly, he'd just hold me down until the storm inside me broke on its own. I didn't plan on ending up like this, curled on the floor in the corner of my apartment, half crying, half laughing while a golden retriever with a crooked ear slowly crushes the air from my lungs. But I suppose no one ever does. It started like every other Thursday. I woke up late because I hit snooze 3 times too many, then choked down burnt toast while brushing dog hair off my black work pants. My boss gave me that look again in the staff meeting, the one that says, "Is this really the best you can do?" I nodded like it didn't gut me every time. By 5 o'clock, my brain was scrambled eggs and my phone battery was dead. I rode the bus home in silence, staring at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized anymore, hair tied up in a desperate knot, eyes sunken with half-slept nights, lips pressed tight to keep the dam from bursting in public, but I made it through the door. I always do. I told myself I'd shower. I'd eat real food. I'd answer mom's voicemail about whether I'm seeing anyone nice yet. Lies. The second my hand touched the living room light switch, everything just caved in. I didn't even aim for the couch. The floor looked solid. Cold. Honest. So I sank to it, knees to chest, face buried in my sweater sleeve, hoping maybe if I made myself small enough the thoughts would lose track of me. That's when Benson found me. He's not subtle, my Benson. He's big enough to knock over a coffee table with a happy wag of his tail and dumb enough to try squeezing into my lap like he's still a puppy. But tonight, there was nothing clumsy in the way he patted across the floor, nothing silly about the way he pressed his wet nose against my cheek like a paramedic checking for signs of life. Then he did it, the thing that cracked the dam wide open. He climbed on top of me. All 94 pounds of loyalty and fur and warmth spread across my back and shoulders like a living, panting blanket that smelled faintly of rain and the neighbor's flower bed he dug up last week. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just laid there. If you've never been pinned to the floor by a dog who loves you more than he loves bacon, you haven't lived. Or maybe you've never truly broken. Because in that exact moment, something inside me that had been fighting so hard to stay rigid just melted. I couldn't move. Not that I wanted to. His weight was oddly comforting, a reminder that no matter how fragile I felt, the world was still heavy enough to keep me here. Alive. Breathing. Accounted for. Benson, I whispered into the floorboards, my voice hoarse from silent crying. He answered with a low rumble in his chest, a sound closer to a purr than a growl. His tail thumped against my calf once. Twice. Then it stilled, satisfied that his mission was underway. I don't know how long we stayed that way, me, the human pancake, him, my canine paperweight. Time gets fuzzy when your heartbeat is trying to match someone else's. I heard the fridge hum. The neighbors argue about whose turn it was to take out the trash. Somewhere far away, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, begging for my attention. But Benson and I were on the floor. And that was the only place that mattered. I shifted a little to get my arm free. He adjusted too, just enough to wedge his giant head into the crook of my neck, exhaling hot dog breath that made my ear twitch, but also made me laugh through the tears. "Don't you dare move," I muttered, wiping my nose on my sleeve. He didn't. He pressed closer, paws splayed over my ribs like he was bracing himself to keep me from drifting off into the dark corners of my mind. People think dogs don't understand sadness. Or heartbreak. Or shame. Those people have never met Benson. He knows. He knows when the smile on my face is fake. He knows when I need him to wrestle me onto the rug and demand belly rubs until my brain remembers how to feel soft again, and tonight, he knew the floor was safer than the bed. The bed is too empty now, too much memory, too much space that another heartbeat used to fill. But the floor? The floor has no expectations. No ghosts. Just me, Benson, and the quiet promise that this moment is enough. I felt his chest rise and fall against my back, a steady metronome counting out seconds I didn't have to fear. He was warm, heavy, unapologetically present. And in that warmth, my breathing found a rhythm it hadn't known in weeks. Tomorrow, the world would expect me to stand up, to shower, to smile politely at people who don't really want to know the truth. To say, I'm fine, thanks, because that's easier than the real answer, but tomorrow wasn't here yet. Tonight, I had Benson. I traced circles behind his ear, the one that flops just a little to the left because of an old fight before I found him at the shelter. He let out a contented sigh that vibrated through my bones. I swear I felt his love settle into the cracks of me, patching places I didn't even know were broken. The truth is, I was never much good at being alone. But being alone with Benson doesn't feel like being alone at all. It feels like being chosen, every single day, by a creature who doesn't care about my failures, my flaws, or how often I forget to water the plants he keeps trying to dig up anyway. The floor creaked under us as I shifted again, finally daring to roll onto my side. Benson rolled with me, draping one massive paw over my waist like a protective brother. His nose tucked into the curve of my collarbone, and that was it. I belonged to him. No negotiation. Outside, the world kept spinning. The unpaid bills still sat unopened on the counter. The voicemail light still blinked on my phone. My heart still ached in places I couldn't reach on my own, but here on this floor, none of that one. Not tonight. Damn. My name is Lena Carter. I am bruised but not broken. I am alone but never lonely. And if anyone ever asks me what saved me, really saved me, I'll tell them it wasn't a therapist or a lover or a self-help book. It was 94 pounds of unconditional love that laid right on top of me until I remembered how to breathe. And tomorrow, when the world tries to pull me apart again, I'll remember this floor. I'll remember this weight. I'll remember that sometimes, it's okay to let yourself be held down until the storm passes, because sometimes, the only safe place left is the one you never planned for, right here, flat on the hardwood, with fur in your mouth, tears in your eyes, and a heartbeat pressed against your ribs that swears, I've got you. I always will. I wish I could tell you that when I finally woke on that floor, I sprang up fresh and whole and ready to forgive the universe for all its cruelty. But healing doesn't follow a neat schedule. It creeps in quiet, unexpected moments. Like the dawn light sneaking across my living room carpet that next morning, brushing against Benson's fur where he still lay, sprawled half on top of me as if daring the sun to try and move him. My back ached. My hip had gone numb sometime in the night. A drool stain bloomed under Benson's muzzle where he'd snored into my shoulder for hours. And yet, for the first time in what felt like months, I didn't hate waking up. I shifted carefully, hoping maybe he'd take the hint and roll off me so I could peel myself off the floor and pretend to be functional. He didn't budge. Not even a twitch of his massive tail. Just one eye cracked open, watched me like a warden watches a prisoner, then closed again when he decided escape was unlikely. Come on, Benson, I whispered, voice still rough from sleep and dried tears. I gave his side a gentle shove. Nothing. I pressed harder. He snorted an insulted huff and sank his chin deeper into the crook between my neck and collarbone. If you think you've known stubbornness, I dare you to outstubborn a dog who's decided you need to stay exactly where you are. I tried bribery next. Benson. Breakfast. Bacon. I'll fry you an entire pan, okay? Extra crispy. One floppy ear flicked. His tail gave a single, sleepy wag. But he did not move. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to cry again, but the tears didn't come as easily anymore. Maybe that was Benson's secret plan. All along, he pinned me down until my body just ran out of sadness. Eventually, I surrendered. I sank back into the flattened imprint my body had made in the rug and let my hand wander through the tangled gold of his fur. He smelled like yesterday's rain and stale apartment air, somehow comforting and slightly embarrassing at the same time. In that stillness, my mind did what it always does when it's given space. It replayed old ghosts, the fight with Jonah. The last fight had been about nothing and everything. Dirty dishes in the sink that somehow meant I didn't respect him. A text I didn't answer fast enough that meant I was distracted. He didn't want to compete with my job, my exhaustion, my own brain. So he didn't. He left. Took the guitar, left the dog. It should have hurt more that he left. But it hurt worse that it didn't. Benson let out a soft snore that vibrated against my chest. I wondered if he dreamed about before me, before the rescue shelter, before the day he pressed his face to the wire of the kennel and chose me without a second's hesitation. I hadn't planned to adopt a dog that day. I'd just gone to look, a distraction from the noise in my own head. But Benson had pressed his crooked ear to that fence, wagged his tail exactly once, and something inside me whispered, yes. I must have fallen asleep again, because the next thing I knew the light through the window was sharper, louder somehow. And Benson was still there, still pinning me like a living paperweight who refused to admit breakfast was long overdue. I didn't mind. Not really. His warmth kept the edges of my thoughts from fraying too far. When I finally managed to roll half free, a slow, careful dance so I didn't hurt his joints or my bruised ribs, he followed me instantly. I wasn't on the floor 2 seconds before he clambered right back on top, this time half draped across my lap, head on my knee, sighing so dramatically it made me giggle through the ache. Fine, I murmured, ruffling the fur between his ears. I surrender, Captain. We'll stay here forever, shall we? He answered with a soft woof that made my chest squeeze tight around my heart. Outside, the city was waking up, horns blaring, the neighbors' toddlers shrieking about cereal. Normal life, just beyond the glass. Inside, my world had shrunk to a 2-foot radius of dog fur, warmth, and the steady hum of his breath. I could feel the lists already trying to crawl back into my head: groceries, overdue rent, the email my boss marked urgent last night that I pretended not to see. But Benson wouldn't let me get up. He refused to give the world a chance to sink its claws back. So instead of planning or worrying, I did something reckless. I stayed on the floor with him. I ran my fingers through his fur until they found the little scar near his shoulder. A jagged memory from a time before me. He twitched under my touch but didn't flinch away. I wish I could be more like you, I told him softly. He lifted one sleepy eyelid. You don't care if you've failed. Or if you smell like wet grass and bad breath. You don't overthink. You just love. He snorted. It sounded suspiciously like agreement. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten in nearly a day. His ears perked at that, not out of concern for me, but because stomach noises often mean treats. Smart boy, all right, big guy, I sighed, shifting under his weight again. We both need breakfast. How about pancakes? No bacon for you, you little thief, you'll just sneak it off my plate anyway. Benson yawned wide enough to show every one of his shiny teeth, then did the unthinkable. He stood. All 4 paws planted on my thighs for a heartbeat before he bounded off and trotted to the kitchen door, tail wagging in a slow, lazy arc typical. The moment he decides it's time to move, we move. I sat there for a moment longer, feeling the ghost of his weight on my legs, strangely missing it. Then I pushed myself up on stiff elbows, wincing at the creak in my back. Maybe people weren't meant to sleep on hardwood floors under living blankets. Or maybe this was exactly what people like me needed sometimes. I followed him to the kitchen, where he was already sitting politely by his bowl, looking up at me with that goofy grin that had gotten him extra treats more times than I could count. You're too good for me, Benson, I whispered, scratching the top of his head as I poured kibble into his bowl. He licked my wrist in answer, a soft, wet kiss that carried no judgment, only a promise. I made pancakes for myself, burning the first batch because I got lost watching him devour his breakfast with single-minded joy. Watching him reminded me how simple happiness could be: food, warmth, a safe place to rest your head, and someone to love you even when you can't love yourself very well. With my plate in hand, I sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor. He patted over and, without missing a beat, settled his big golden body right across my lap again, as if to say, Don't even think about eating alone, Mom. I laughed, mouthful of too sweet pancake. He thumped his tail and pressed his nose to my knee, pushing closer until I had to set the plate aside just to wrap both arms around him, and just like that, between sticky fingers and fur that smelled faintly of grass and sunshine, I realized I wasn't trapped here at all. I was exactly where I needed to be, held down by love. Reminded, bite by bite, that maybe I could stand up tomorrow, and the day after that, too, but for now? The floor was still the safest place. Because on this floor, with my dog on top of me, nothing bad could reach me, nothing at all. If you'd asked me a week ago what my biggest fear was, I would have said loneliness, that sharp, echoing silence that rattles around your chest late at night when no one's there to say your name. But now I'm starting to realize something bigger. Maybe my greatest fear isn't being alone. Maybe it's not knowing who I am when I'm not holding myself together for someone else. That it's funny how a dog can teach you that, without saying a single word. By noon that same day, I'd managed to peel myself off the kitchen floor long enough to take a shower. That alone felt like an Olympic event. Benson, naturally, decided that privacy was unacceptable. He wedged his big head between the cracked bathroom door and the frame, snorted at the steam curling out, and plopped down with a dramatic grunt just outside the shower curtain. Every time I peeked through the plastic, there he was, one brown eye, watching. As if the bathroom tiles might swallow me whole if he blinked too long. Creeper, I teased over the rush of the water. He sneezed in reply, then sighed loud enough to compete with the showerhead. When I stepped out, towel wrapped tight around my dripping hair, he trotted backward ahead of me all the way to the bedroom, a reverse escort that ended with him springing onto the bed the second I dropped my wet clothes in the hamper. He wasn't allowed on the bed. Not technically. Jonah used to hate the dog hair, used to mutter about how it smelled like wet fur and slobber whenever Benson tried to sneak a nap on the quilt. But Jonah was gone, and the bed had been too big and too cold for too long. Anyway, so when Benson sprawled across the pillows, tail thumping against the headboard, I didn't shoo him away. I laughed, the real kind, belly deep and surprised at itself, then flopped beside him still wrapped in my towel, pressing my forehead to his damp nose. You win, king of the house, I mumbled. He puffed air into my face in smug agreement. Part of me wanted to stay there forever. But the real world is greedy and loud and has 1,000 little hooks waiting to pull you back in. So I got dressed, pulling on my softest jeans and a sweater that smelled faintly of detergent and old comfort. He watched every step, head tilted, tail sweeping a lazy rhythm over my sheets. All right, Mr. Shadow. Walk? His ears shot up so fast I swear I heard the click in his neck. He leapt from the bed in one glorious, clumsy bound that nearly knocked my bedside lamp to the floor. If he could speak, I know exactly what he'd say. Finally. Took you long enough. Woman. I clipped his leash to his collar, not that he needed it, but neighbors complain when a big dog like him struts down the hallway like he owns the building, which, in a way, he does. He pressed so close to my leg while I locked the door that I almost tripped down the stairs. Outside, the day was one of those reluctant early spring afternoons that can't decide if it wants to stay winter for one more hour or forgive itself into sunshine. The air smelled of thawing soil and damp concrete, and Benson lifted his nose high to taste every molecule. That we didn't go far. Just down the block, across the quiet intersection, past the same broken bench where old Mr. Harmon smokes his pipe every morning. Benson sniffed every patch of grass, peed on exactly 3 lampposts, and paused at the corner where the bakery vent spills out the smell of fresh bread. He looked up at me with pleading eyes. No croissant for you, thief, I said, tugging him gently away. He huffed but obeyed, trotting just a step ahead, tail swinging in a wide, happy arc. Walking him used to feel like a chore. An obligation squeezed between meetings and grocery runs and pretending my life looked like everyone else's Instagram feed. But today it felt different, slower, softer, like he was teaching me how to see the world through a nose and 2 paws and no expectations. Halfway back home, I caught our reflection in a dark shop window, me, hair still damp in a messy bun, eyes clearer than they'd been in months. Benson, tongue lolling, looking up at me like I hung the moon. We looked okay. Not perfect. Not whole. But okay, and for now, that was enough. Back in the apartment, the spell almost broke. The couch waited, the laptop waited, the unopened bills waited like sharp teeth hiding under my coffee table. I felt that old ache in my chest, the guilt that says get up, fix it, be better, be useful, but Benson would not let me spiral. That he followed me from room to room like a furry shadow, bumping my leg every few steps until I gave in and dropped to the floor again. The moment I did, he did exactly what he'd done the night before, climbed right on top of me, curled himself so tight around my ribs that it felt like a hug with bones and claws and sunshine fur. I laughed into his shoulder fur, feeling ridiculous and lucky and so fragile I thought I might shatter. His heartbeat thudded slow and certain against my ribs, a drum I could sink my own fear to. Why do you always know, huh? I murmured into his ear. How do you always know when I can't hold myself up anymore? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The rest of the afternoon drifted by in lazy waves, dozing on the rug together, Benson's paws twitching through dreams, me waking every so often to the tickle of his whiskers against my JAWAT dusk. I made us both dinner. Kibble for him, scrambled eggs and toast for me because anything more complicated still felt impossible. He sat politely beside me at the kitchen counter, watching every bite with a stare so intense it made me laugh through my mouth full when I dropped a piece of toast. By accident, he snatched it midair before it even hit the floor. His tail slapped the cabinet so hard I worried he'd knock over my spice rack. Food thief, I scolded. He just wagged harder, unashamed. Later, I settled on the couch with a cheap blanket and a show I'd seen a dozen times. Benson wedged himself right on top of my legs, his giant head heavy against my knee, snoring before the opening credits rolled. I could have moved him. Should have moved him. My foot fell asleep, pins and needles crawling up my calf. But every time I shifted, his paws tightened around my shin like a stubborn toddler refusing to let go. So I stayed. Outside my window, the city sighed into night. A car alarm in the distance, the neighbor's TV bleeding laughter through thin walls. Inside, Benson breathed. Steady. Loyal. Mind. I realized then that maybe he didn't follow me everywhere because he thought I'd get lost. Maybe he followed me because somewhere deep down, he knew he needed me too. Not just for food or walks or belly rubs, but because I'm his floor, his safe place, just as much as he's mine. I reached down and buried my fingers in the warm scruff of his neck. He stirred, cracked one eye, then sighed and pressed closer. Stay with me, okay? I whispered into the hush of the room. He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because as long as I kept finding the strength to sit on the floor, he'd keep laying right on top of me, a living promise that some loves never ask questions, never judge the mess, and never leave you to face the dark alone. Some people say dogs can sense danger before we do. Earthquakes, storms, heartbreak, they claim dogs know first. I used to roll my eyes at that. But tonight, I stopped laughing at old wives' tales, because tonight, Benson proved to me that sometimes, he knows things my own heart is too distracted to feel coming. It started simple enough, just after sunset, with the city outside my window, dripping with leftover pink light that made even my shabby apartment look gentle. I was on the couch, a half-drunk mug of chamomile tea going cold on the coffee table. Benson was, as usual, draped across my legs like he owned them, because, honestly, he did what I had just dozed off, that drifting kind of nap you slip into when your brain is tired but your bones are still humming with unfinished worries. Benson's weight was my anchor to that soft, in-between place where fear can't quite reach, until he moved. It wasn't a normal shift, not his usual sleepy reposition to steal more blanket or squash my thigh further. This was abrupt, his whole body stiffened, back legs pushing hard into my shin as he half rose, ears pricked so sharply they looked carved from stone. My eyes popped open. Benson? I whispered, throat dry. He didn't look at me. His gaze locked on the front door, head tilting, nose flaring in quick, deliberate sniffs. Before I could think, the hairs on my own arms rose too, a ripple of ancient instinct I couldn't explain. Then, a soft, almost polite knock, knock. Pause. Knock. Knocked. My stomach twisted itself into a tight knot. Nobody knocked at my door at this hour. Not anymore. Not since Jonah left and the few friends I had drifted like dry leaves once my answers to "How are you?" stopped being easy. I sat up fully, shifting Benson's tense body enough to stand. He resisted, tried to wedge himself between me and the Edge of the couch, but I slipped free, heart pounding a little too fast. Knock. Knock knock knock, who is it? My voice cracked, weaker than I wanted. Silence answered back. I glanced at Benson. He had jumped off the couch now, planting his big golden frame squarely in front of the door. His tail was down, legs braced. A growl, low, vibrating deep in his chest, shivered through the hallway air. Another knock. This time harder. A man's voice. Miss Carter? You home? Just need a quick word. Building maintenance, ma'am. But there was no maintenance scheduled. I would have known. Old Mrs. Patel on the second floor always called everyone a day early to remind them. My mouth went dry. It's late, come back tomorrow. I forced the words out, each syllable landing like a pebble thrown at a storm, and no answer. Just silence. Benson barked then, sharp, startling, nothing like his goofy daytime woofs when he wants me to throw a tennis ball. This bark rattled my chest. It told the stranger on the other side exactly what would happen if he tried that. Doorknob easy, boy, I whispered, though I knew he wouldn't be easy now. Not until this moment passed, then the knob rattled, faint, but unmistakable. Something primal kicked in. I grabbed Benson's collar with one hand and my phone with the other. My fingers trembled so badly I nearly dropped it trying to dial 911. Before I could even hit call, the footsteps retreated. Rapid. Fading down the corridor until they dissolved into the distant thump of the old stairwell door slamming shut. Silence. Again, except for Benson's breathing, hard, fast, protective. I didn't realize until then that I was on the floor again. Somewhere in those few seconds, my knees had given out. I clutched his fur tight, knuckles white in the golden strands. He turned, pressed his forehead to mine, and in that touch I felt every vow he couldn't speak. Nobody hurts you while I'm here. Nobody at IT. Took me 10 minutes to call the police. 10 more to stammer through a report. A young officer came by, looked at the scuffed door frame, asked a few routine questions, and promised extra patrols for the night. Probably just some creep trying all the units, ma'am. Lucky you got this big guy watching your back, he said, scratching Benson's ear. Benson didn't wag. He just stared at the officer's belt, as if making sure there really was a badge and a gun. When the door shut behind him, the apartment fell back into its hush, but not the comforting hush I'd found last night. This one carried an echo. A threat. I double-checked the locks. Triple-checked the chain. Pulled a chair up under the doorknob for good measure, feeling silly but needing it anyway. Benson followed every step, nose nudging my calf each time I paused. As if to say, we're fine, but I'm here if you want to panic a bit more first. I ended up on the floor again. No surprise, I didn't plan to. But the gravity of the hardwood pulled me in the way it always does when my thoughts whirl too fast for the couch to contain them. I sank to my knees, by the door first, hands pressed flat to the cold wood, forehead resting between my fists. Like a prayer I didn't know how to finish. Benson circled behind me once. Twice. Then lowered himself until he was pressed full length against my spine, a golden mountain that refused to let fear push me through the floor. You're too good for me, I murmured into my own palms. His only answer was to breathe heavy. Certain. I don't know how long we stayed like that. 10 minutes. An hour. Time meant nothing. I only knew that the tremor in my chest slowed each time I felt his ribs expand and fall against mine. Eventually, my back hurt enough to remind me I was still human. I leaned sideways, easing to my hip, and Benson adjusted instantly, draping himself half across my torso, nose tucked under my chin, his entire weight pinning me to the boards as if to say, no more answering doors tonight. No more pretending. Just stay here where I can guard every piece of you. His fur smelled faintly of my shampoo. I realized I must have spilled some on him earlier. It made me giggle into the top of his head, a stupid, unexpected sound that shattered the last shreds of leftover fear. I bet you scared him off for good, huh? I whispered. He huffed, nose twitching at my collarbone, tail thumping once against the door. Outside, the city settled back into itself, tires on wet asphalt, the hum of a distant bus, a lullaby of safe, normal noise. Inside, my heartbeat steadied under 100 pounds of proof that sometimes The best lock in the world isn't metal at all, it's fur and warmth and a pair of eyes that see every shadow before it finds you. Later, I drifted. Not quite asleep, not quite awake. I felt Benson shift when the heater kicked on, felt him adjust to keep as much of himself draped across me as possible. I wondered, fleetingly, if he ever wished for the life he might have had, a house with a backyard, kids tugging his ears, a gentle old couple who fed him too many table scraps, but then he snorted in his sleep and wedged his nose tighter against my neck, and I knew, I am his floor too. His safe place. His home, the thought pulsed in my chest like a second heartbeat. A promise. A vow. I closed my eyes. The door was locked. The night was still. And my dog, my guardian, my gravity, my stormbreaker, lay right on top of me, making sure I didn't drift anywhere he couldn't follow. I don't remember drifting off that night on the floor. What I do remember, clear as a bell, is waking before dawn to Benson's quiet grumble vibrating against my ribcage. The apartment was still dark, the street lamp outside painting a single stripe of gold across the living room ceiling. For a moment I thought it had all been a bad dream, the knock, the rattled doorknob, the rush of fear that still made my hands tremble if I thought too hard about it. But Benson's weight pressed all that away. He had stayed right where he'd promised, on top of me, guarding every inch of my heartbeat. He shifted now, nose twitching at the cold air that sneaked through the old window frames. His tail flicked against my leg, an impatient little thump that said, "Morning comes whether you're ready or not, human."
Yeah.
I rasped. Voice scratchy from too much floor sleep. I tried to push him off. He flopped heavier, letting out a single stubborn groan. "Benson," I whined, but he ignored me. His breath puffed hot against my cheek, eyes blinking slow and steady like he was telling me, "We're not done here." Not yet. A low creak outside made us both freeze. Not a knock this time. Just the groan of the old hallway floorboards under someone's careless step. My throat tightened. Benson didn't bark, but the growl vibrating through his chest told me he'd heard it too. The neighbor, probably. Just the neighbor. I repeated it in my head like a prayer. Mrs. Patel. Mr. Harmon with his pipe. The mailman. Nothing more, but fear doesn't care how logical you sound in your own mind. Benson's ears flicked toward the door, nose high, eyes locked on the knob. I pressed a palm to his collar, grounding him, grounding me. We waited, the steps passed. A door shut somewhere down the hall. Silence draped the apartment once more. Damn, my heart slammed so hard against my ribs I thought Benson might mistake it for an intruder itself. He nudged my chin gently, like he knew, and settled more weight onto my belly. It hurt, but I welcomed it. His gravity meant the world hadn't ended while I slept. Finally, I exhaled the breath I hadn't known I'd been holding for hours. By sunrise, I had convinced myself to stand. I did it carefully, inch by inch, bracing against the wall while Benson paced a tight circle around my feet, sniffing every corner as if to confirm that the monsters hadn't come back. I in the kitchen, I made coffee with shaking hands. Benson sat behind me, so close I could feel his warm side against my calf every time I shifted. He wouldn't leave. Not to check his water bowl. Not to fetch his favorite squeaky bear from under the couch. Not even when I spilled a few grounds onto the floor, usually an invitation for him to swoop in and lick the mess clean. No. Today, Benson decided there was no room in the world for anything but me. I carried my mug to the table. He padded beside me in lockstep, bumping my hip each time my steps wavered. When I sank into the chair, he didn't sprawl across my feet like usual, he climbed into my lap instead. 94 pounds of big, determined dog insisting nope. You're not alone yet. Not even for a sip of coffee. It should have been ridiculous. This full-grown retriever folded into my lap like a toddler, head shoved under my chin, back paws braced awkwardly on the edge of my thigh. But instead it felt right. It felt like armor stitched from fur and dog breath and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. I laughed into his scruff. He huffed, content, then sighed so heavily my hair fluttered against my forehead. You're ridiculous, I whispered against his ear. He ignored me, his tail tapping the leg of the table in a slow, lazy rhythm. Outside, the city yawned awake, cars rumbling, pigeons fighting over breadcrumbs on the fire escape. Somewhere in another apartment, a baby wailed. Life doing what? It always does, moving forward, no matter who's scared, no matter who's healing up. By mid-morning, I did something brave. I called the landlord to ask about new locks. My voice shook so badly the woman on the other end asked if I needed her to stay on the line while I checked the hallway. I thanked her but told her no, I didn't say why. Didn't say that the hallway didn't scare me half as much as the thought of Benson having to guard me through another night alone. I hung up and dropped to the floor again without thinking. Not the couch. Not the bed. The floor, my new sanctuary. My battlefield. My truth. Benson didn't hesitate. He flopped down beside me, curling his body so tight against my side that I could feel every twitch of his dreams as he drifted off. I closed my eyes too. One hand buried in the warm ruff of his neck. The knock came just before lunch, this time it was sharp. Official. 3 hard raps that jolted both of us upright. Benson bristled, full body alertness. He lunged toward the door, barking so loud. My bones rattled. But through the bark I heard a man's voice, calm and commanding. Miss Carter? Police. Just following up on your call. I pressed a hand to Benson's back, whispering nonsense to calm him as I peered through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers, badges clear, one tapping the brim of his hat at my fisheye view. I opened the door just a crack, the chain still hooked. Benson wedged his head into the gap, teeth bared in a low snarl that made both officers raise their hands. It's okay, big guy, one said, voice gentle. Ma'am, just wanted to update you. We caught someone on the next block over trying the same thing you described. He's in custody now. Just wanted to make sure you feel safe tonight. Safe, what a word. Heavy as iron. Fragile as glass. I nodded. Thank you. Really? The older officer smiled, eyes flicking down to Benson's snarling face. Good boy. You got there. Looks like he takes his job seriously. I glanced at Benson, my relentless shadow, my warm fortress, my reason for every sunrise after a storm.
Yeah,
I said softly. He does. When they left, I closed the door, locked every bolt, slid the chair back under the knob out of habit. Benson sniffed the spot where the officers had stood, tail low but wagging as if he finally approved of someone besides me. I sat on the floor again, back pressed to the cool wood. I didn't have to. There was no more danger, no more ghostly footsteps in the hall. But habit is a stubborn thing. Fear too. And healing? Healing is the slowest of them all. Benson didn't climb onto me this time. Instead, he nudged my shoulder gently, turned 3 tight circles, then lowered himself across my legs. His weight settled in careful increments, grounding me to the boards he'd guarded so fiercely all week. I buried my face in the thick fur at his neck. He smelled like yesterday's sunshine and this morning's worry, like hope stitched together from the simple magic of loyalty. Thank you, I breathed into him. A promise, not a plea. Outside, the city roared with living things that didn't know my name, didn't care about my ghosts. But inside, under 94 pounds of living courage, I felt stronger than I had in a long time. Tomorrow, I would stand. Not because the fear was gone. Not because the world was fixed. But because I knew, as long as I kept finding my floor, Benson would find me. That he'd lay right on top of me if he had to, and sometimes, that's the kind of armor no monster can break through.